Unite Round is done and dusted for another year and possibly the last year. We don't know yet as to what the future holds for the round which unites us all. If only it had a beat of some description to go with it, but perhaps a unity beat. Who knows? Um, the weekend threw up some very interesting results, mostly because of the heat. It was very, very hot in Sydney for those who did not attend. You might have seen it once or twice on social media. You know, I, I think maybe a couple of people were talking about it. I'm not too sure. While elsewhere, the Matildas have claimed the World Cup success, defeating the USA 6-2. While another national team might not have any players to take to the field with, despite having 36 of them to choose from at the start of camp. My name is Poletti, and this is the Dubcast, part of the Roundball Australia Network. And despite my best efforts to forget that she made her way to Sydney on Friday afternoon, Burke was indeed there at Unite Round. What did you make of the entire weekend, Burke?
I thought it was really good fun. It was very tiring and, as you mentioned, very hot. But it was good fun. I had a really good time. Some great football on show too.
Yes, there was indeed. Although maybe only from some of the teams was there some great football on show. There's definitely one team where there was not anything good on show, and we will get to that very, very shortly. Over the last 7 days, Burke, what was your biggest storyline in Australian women's football?
My biggest storyline, um, I guess probably the continued collapse of the Western Sydney Wanderers is probably the biggest standout for me. Yeah.
Yeah, so we will go straight to Western Sydney Wanderers nil, Brisbane Roar 4. Brisbane absolutely dominated this game from start to finish. Literally, the opening whistle. The Wanderers were never in this game, despite the best efforts of Sham Karmas to try to do something, but as a goalkeeper, can only do so much when everyone else around her is letting her down. We'll start with Brisbane first. For me, this sort of solidified my look at them as the most complete team in the competition so far. And post game, Alex Smith said, I think we can polish off quite a few things when it comes to performance. So that's what we'll be focusing on over the next 2 weeks going into Wellington away. He also believes that they can get better. And for a side that I know it's only 4 rounds in, but already looks like the most complete side in the competition as they've raced away to the top of the table. That's a very scary thought, isn't it, Burke?
It is. They had a fantastic game once again, unsurprisingly. I loved the goals scored by Momo Hiyashi, both of them, even though the first one I know did take a pretty severe deflection. It was just a great game to watch, especially if you're a Brisbane fan. Not so much if you're from the Western Sydney side of things, but yeah, Brisbane just complete performance. Leah Varley had another rock solid performance in the back line. Yeah, it's great stuff.
Yeah, and those were Hayashi's first 2 goals in the A Leagues. To go along with Emily Pringle's first in the A League, I believe, as well, and Tamika Yalla with an audacious chip that I'm surprised did not have all of the sauce with it to give Brisbane their 4-0 scoreline. I mentioned already, Sham Karmas has been the best player for the Wanderers so far this year, but she can only do so much. And that will lead us perfectly into our first listener question from Kieran Yap, which is, why are the Wanderers? And that was literally the question. Why are the Wanderers? And I've got to say I agree with you, Kieran. That's a perfectly valid question. And this is what Robbie Hooker had to say after the game.
We just didn't play well enough. We weren't at the races today. People didn't show up as a team, as individuals. So if you haven't got the competitive juices flowing, it's going to be hard to use some of the qualities that you've got to make a difference.
You spoke last week how you felt it was the best that your side had performed already this season, and then 6 days later, this. What happened during the week to sort of? Is there anything that you can pinpoint that led to this?
No, that's what happens when you got young players. Young players have good performances, mixed in with a lot of mediocre performances because they're still learning. So they've got to learn to bring their A game each week, because each week's a test. It's not a 1 week, I did well and that's it. You put the cue in the rack, and we've got young kids that still need to learn that.
Is there anything you can do to help speed up that process, or is this going to be trial by fire, basically?
Yeah, it's we're working on trying to create scoring opportunities. We've got players who are out of form across the park, not at their best, and we've got young kids as well. So it's a mix of I guess trying to develop our young players to become better players individually and fit into the team, and it's also a mix to try and get other players up to speed who are not up to speed in terms of their conditioning, and that goes across the squad, and that's where we're at the moment. That's the reality of it. Yeah.
Were there any players that you felt had a standout performance tonight?
No.
You mentioned about the younger players. Is that the biggest challenge for the club right now? They're having that young players and trying to find that consistency to realise. Is that something that sort of is going to take time?
It will take time. We've just been given an academy and an NPL licence for next year. So the focus is always going to be about bringing our younger players through. We've only got 2 foreign players. One's out with a broken ankle for about another 3 or 4 months. The other one, Anna, played tonight. She's been a regular in the team. And we did that deliberately because we need to have a proper pathway for kids to come through. So it's going to take time. There's no excuses for it. That's just the way it is at this stage.
Are there any thoughts of doing anything in the transfer window when it opens?
No, unless we get the news that our other Japanese player is out for the season, in which we can get an injury replacement. But we don't have money to buy anyone.
Are you potentially going to ask the club if things are dire, or have you been told there's no anything?
No, I'm not asking the club for any more money. I've been told.
Yeah, it's an interesting quote, interesting take from Robbie Hooker.
Yeah, I mean this idea of a young squad is going to have challenges is not it's not it's a reasonable expectation, and because people are still learning, they're still developing. But if that's a known problem, to me, it's concerning in the sense that you're still trying to you come into the season trying to tell your fans we're going to do well, this and that, even though we've got a young squad, and it's just to continuously throw your players under the bus as an excuse because they're young players, to me just doesn't sit right.
No, that was my immediate take as well. Very interesting. Not what I would have said, but I guess I'm built different. Yeah, very, very interesting.
And then you've got the idea that, okay, it's only 4 games in the season done. They'll play game number 5 this weekend before they get their week off as part of the split round coming into the international break. It's a 23-game season. There's still plenty of time to turn your season around. And yet, as we've just talked about, it already seems like you're throwing your players under the bus. The idea that the club is saying there's no money to do anything in the transfer window when we know it's only going to take 30, 32 points, maybe a little bit less this year, given how everyone's sort of taking results off each other early, which didn't happen last year. So for the club to have said there's no money available already, and it's almost like you can just put a line through the Wanderers already this season, isn't it?
Well, I think he's decided that, hasn't he? It's kind of very much a defeated look. And I can't say I particularly blame him that much right now because they do have to play Melbourne City in like 4 days. But after that, they really need I feel like they just need to do a hard reset and see what they can kind of scrape through there. Because there's no reason at week 4 to be saying, yeah, season's done, my players are too young to compete kind of thing. But we shall see how this one unfolds.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for Wanderers fans, hopefully there's some positives to come out of the rest of this season. It's still, let me do some quick math here, 19 games to go as of the time of recording. Plenty of time to turn a season around. But yeah, so Kieran, hopefully that answers your question of why are the Wanderers. We'll move ahead to my big storyline from the weekend now, which is the Heat. What are we doing here? Like, we had a 2:15 p.m. kickoff for television, which had a drinks break. We had a 1:30 p.m. kickoff, which had a drinks break. A 5 p.m. and a 4 p.m. game. Neither of those had drinks breaks, but the heat was still definitely around. Like, I could feel it inside the media box, which was air conditioned, I might add, and I could still feel the heat out there. It wasn't too bad in the stand itself, the main grandstand, because it does create its own. It creates its own wind tunnel essentially with the way it's been designed. So if you're sitting in the main grandstand, it's nice and cool down there. But as soon as you step out onto the concourse, that disappears immediately. And I know it was a lot hotter at pitch level than it was just the ambient temperature of the air. I think it was Marissa Lordanic who said it on the Far Post earlier this week that having a drinks break is just a solution and you admitting there's a problem. Which, I understand certain things happen, but like the round, like everyone knew coming in, like I said this a couple of months ago that I felt that there was going to be a game that was delayed because of the heat. It's late November, early December in Sydney. It's going to be hot, and what we ended up with was a hot weekend of football. Who'd have guessed? I don't quite understand what the logic and the reasoning was. You've got this. It was originally supposed to be at Leichhardt, which has lights that are suitable for a nighttime broadcast. It was then moved to Cogra, which also has lights that are suitable for a nighttime broadcast. I don't see why there was any reason why the games shouldn't have been scheduled better and delayed a little bit. For me, that was probably the big negative out of the weekend was the heat and just the impact it had on the football. Given that you could probably argue we were robbed of some higher quality football that we should have been treated to, because it was very clear watching certain games that the players were absolutely impacted by the heat, Burke.
Yeah, for sure. I could also feel the heat. I did some radio commentary for a couple of the games, and even though that box was air conditioned as well, you could still feel it up there. And I definitely agree what you said about us being robbed of some better football. And considering they have the floodlights there, it just, I don't know, it just feels very lazy of them to not push the games back by a couple of hours, especially like the Friday games. Like, there was no reason for the Friday games to be that early. That was unreal. And that also, I think, attributed to quite a low crowd on the Friday because no one could get there from work for that time. That was crazy. Don't do that again if they do this again. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we will go to the other game from Friday night now. Adelaide 0, Wellington 1. First win of the season for Wellington. The first professional goal for Maya McCutcheon, their new signing, who's come over from North Carolina Courage. Wellington spent the week in camp in New South Wales following the loss to the Jets and the quick turnaround for Unite Round. I know they got the win, so the obvious answer is, did it pay off? Or that it paid off, but did it pay off, Burke?
I think so. I think that it was a great call for them not to um, not to go back before coming to Unite round, especially considering they played, it was Jets earlier, so they didn't have to travel too far
Yes.
at all. So yeah, I think that was a great call by Wellington. I'm really happy for them to have finally gotten a win on the board. I'm a bit surprised at Adelaide being unable to score considering the way that they've been playing. So this being one of the only actual games that had a winner was interesting to me.
Yeah, Adrian Stenter said after the match that he felt his side just lacked clinical finishing in the final third. The first half they definitely struggled a bit. Claudia Jenkins was easily the player of the first half, peppering of shots from Wellington throughout, and they only conceded with the final kick of the half. Stenter did also raise question as to why that goal was actually allowed to take place, given that, as he said, 1 minute of stoppage time was shown on the board and they were in like the third or fourth minute when the goal went in. But he conceded that it was at the referee's discretion. It came out much better for the second half. Just couldn't do anything with their better performance.
Mm.
While sort of became a little bit more frustrated as the game went on and began to give away some needless fouls in the last 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, absolutely. I I kind of hate it when that happens. I understand why it happens, the frustration seeping in, but it makes me sad because I know that players are able to give much better performances, but it's just that, classic head loss at the end of a game when you know it's not going to go your way kind of thing.
Yeah. In terms of some good news for Adelaide fans as well, Stenta did say that Chelsea Dorber and Nanako Sasaki are not too far away from returning and are on schedule to return some point not too long after the international break. So for a side that's already clicking quite well, especially in comparison to last season, I reckon we can only say that for another couple of weeks or so. It's good news for Adelaide fans. We'll move on to Central Coast Mariners 1, Melbourne Victory 1. Now, Burke, you were on the call for this game. It was heat impacted. It was a tale of two halves. Annalise Rasmussen gets her second goal in as many games. Kayla Morrison with the very late goal. What did you make of this one?
I thought that Central Coast should have won. And I think I know the only reason they didn't win was because Claudia Bunge decided that she wasn't losing this game because she was the only person determined enough to go after the ball at the corner that they scored off to provide the Kayla Morrison assist. The assist for Kayla Morrison. Definitely wasn't Victory's best performance, but once again, Emily Husband has put on a coaching masterclass. They did everything right at every turn. They should have kept that clean sheet. That's the only thing they have left to do.
Yeah, for me, this game very much showed why the Mariners will be a contender again this season. It's the grit, it's the determination, it's the silky, free-flowing football that they were able to play while holding strong defensively. Jeff Hopkins post-game said that during the first 45 minutes they struggled to keep up with the overlapping runs in midfield, that the Mariners were just able to create over and over and over again. You could probably put some of that down to the heat, but both teams have to play in it, and one team was able to play well in the first 45, the other wasn't. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, you look at some of the losses they've had in the off season, but then you look at the recruitment, they've done incredibly well, and like I said, it shows why they're going to be a contender again for me, because it's a proper team performance all across the park. And so, that's half the challenge for sides that want to compete, is being able to get the team to work together properly, isn't it, Burke?
Yeah, absolutely. You really can't fault the performance outside of the one moment. But yeah, if they keep pulling these kinds of things out, they're definitely making it another finals appearance. Don't know how far they'll go once we get down to that, but yeah, at this point I'm very confident in saying they're going to be there.
Yeah, so am I. I definitely think top six is definitely within the realm of possibility, possibly even top four and a home final in week one. Jeff Hopkins, post game as well, was asked about Kayla Morrison, his thoughts on her, and we'll play that audio for you now.
And can I ask about Kayla? Obviously, become a really important player, scored a very important goal today.
Yep.
There's a lot of talk about her potentially, becoming eligible for the Matildas. Like, what does she like to play with, and when do you think you'll see her in a Texi jersey?
Yeah, look, I think paperwork's in at the moment. We're just finding out not her eligibility, but when she's able to play. So, yeah, look, I think if she was eligible to play, she would be getting an opportunity in this window. Look, you can see the things that you want from a captain, a leader, and a central defender. She gives all of those. She's dependable. She on and off the field, she leads by example. And yeah, look, today she set plays. She often pops up and either pulls us out of the mire or wins us the game as well. So yeah, it didn't go unnoticed that the goal came from a central defender playing to another central defender in the box. So great from Bungie and
in the back room, what kind of presence does she bring? Obviously, she's been captain for a while now.
yeah, look, she's a leader at this club. Everybody looks up to her without doubt. I'm talking about the players and the staff. She's great for me to bounce things off as well. Players want to talk to me. They often talk to Kayla and our leadership group. So yeah, look, I won't swap her for anything.
Kayla is not someone who goes unnoticed by just the club as a whole. The last season, Tony Popovich talked about Kayla recovering from injury and everything like that, and how he used her as an example with the men's side. It's kind of like she's not getting there's the whole injury, they don't get paid full time, and yet she's in here in the gym, trying to rehab 3 days a week. It's so you've got such a leader like that. You've just spoken all her praises, but having someone there that even the men's side of your club are looking up to. How good is that for you?
No, look, I've just said I wouldn't swap her. I wouldn't swap her for anyone. And yeah, look, I think every coach in the league would hope that they've got at least one player in their squad that they can rely on 100%. And Kayla's that person. But saying that, we've got a number of players that are kind of heading that way as well. And I guess the other thing it does is it mentors other players around the club to see what a real leader looks like, and to aspire to be like that. And she leads by example, and others follow. And we're actually growing a number of young players with the same or very similar qualities.
And Burke, for me, what stood out in that audio was the idea of trying to grow more players to be like Kayla Morrison. It really is a testament to how highly Jeff Hopkins thinks of her, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does, and I really like that idea. Actually, I like the thought of Victory becoming a little Kayla Morrison duplicate factory. Just please keep churning out centre backs, please, and make sure they're Australian in some way, shape, or form. Whether that comes later or they're already Australian, don't care. Just make them Australian. Yeah, highly rate. Keep doing that.
None of this 5-year waiting for FIFA clearances and whatnot, because we need centre backs now.
Yeah, immediately. Yesterday, even 5 years ago, actually. But that's neither here nor there, because it's it is what it is.
It is what it is, and hopefully we are blessed with Aussie Kayla in the Matildas squad at some point in the not too distant future. Perhaps even at the She Believes Cup in February. It'd be great for Kayla Morrison to just goal line saving tackle against the USA. I could already picture it now.
Yeah, I can see that.
We'll move on to Newcastle 1, Western United 1, the second of our 1-1 draws. And don't worry, for all you draw enthusiasts, there's still more to come. Jets failed to take all 3 points again. Western clawed back late. Some good chances throughout the match. Tiana Robertson saving a penalty for the Jets. In fact, she was quite strong in this game, and the only reason she conceded was because Grace Maher decided that she was going to score and no one was going to stop her. But for me, their overall performance, Western clearly missed Lagazo last week, and her impact back in this game was noticeable, Burke.
Yeah, a player like Lagazo, you cannot replace in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, they were definitely very happy to have her back. Her missing having the penalty saved, whichever one you want to say, because I don't know, some online places have said it hit the post, others were saying it was saved. I don't know. But her not converting that penalty it felt kind of unlike her. But I don't know if she's still just trying to get back into the swing of things after having that week away. But yeah, they should have scored. They should have had a goal there. Shame, and it's a shame that they didn't. The Jets had a good game as well. Tiana Robertson, really good performance, except for conceding the goal, obviously. And when she took out her own defender, like, I understand being a super keeper like that puts you very, very high up the pitch, but you don't need to go that far.
I mean, it's very deliberate from Brian Campbell for whoever is keeper, that they want to play high up the pitch. They want to be almost playing as another centre back, I guess, is probably the way to do it. And it is a trend we're starting to see more and more of in modern football, but it does lead to situations like that. What do you make of the Jets, Burke? Because for me, they're a fascinating case of they've got the potential to do so well, but there's just something holding them back.
Yeah, I think it's, again, going back to the loss of Serena Bolden, where they don't have that kind of really strong central forward that they can use to get them on the scoreboards. And obviously they struggled a little bit towards the end of the game. They did well to hold on, actually, because they did go down to 10 players after Lara Gooch was injured and taken out of the game, and they had no more substitution windows. So they're clearly a strong team. They can rally when they need to, but they need to start scoring more goals. They can. We've seen what their players can do. They just need to start doing it more frequently. Like, we can't just be having kind of one-hit wonders from the Jets. We need every single to be a hit.
Yeah, and Ryan Campbell post game said that team medical staff said the injury didn't look too serious to Lara Gooch, but that it will result in a bit of time off the park. Good news, I guess, that it doesn't seem too bad, but obviously things could have changed since Saturday afternoon that we haven't been made aware of yet. Actually go for proper evaluation. So hopefully speedy recovery for her. Tash Pryor also went down in this game, but she has been cleared of any injury. Campbell did say post-game that it was precautionary, and she has joined the Matildas camp, thankfully, and we'll get to see out her call-up in camp. Sunday, Canberra 1, Perth 1. Perth performed strongly in the first half. Stephen Peters said that he felt that if his side had got the second goal, they would have gone on and won. But he did say also as well that it was try and take the positives. It was their first point on the road this season, so take the positives where they can. He was also a little critical of the refs, saying that I don't think the ref had a particularly strong game and that he's going to have to keep his thoughts there. So I think that tells you what he actually thinks that he can't actually say. But I'm not going to try and put words in Stephen Peters' mouth or anything like that. Mary Stannage-Floody equalised in the second half. She only scores bangers, as Taryn Heddo said on commentary. As Canberra continue their strong turnaround from last season, which is a testament to their recruitment and their growing bond on and off the pitch, where they're just gelling quite together as a team. And this is something else that Stannage-Floody said post-game, where it's becoming like a real sisterhood down there. They're working for each other both on the pitch and off the pitch. To me, given that what we saw from Canberra last year from an on-field perspective, and I'm not going to try to speak to what things were like off the pitch, but surely the strong on-field performances would start off the pitch, Burke.
Yeah, you would think so. I think Canberra had a good game, not their best. There were definitely a couple of opportunities that both Michelle Heyman and Maya Markovsky had in front of goal where you'd think any other day of the week that they would be putting that in the back of the net. Again, I'm not sure if it was the heat. I'm pretty sure I got a bit sunburnt actually watching this game in the stands on my arms, so I don't know how the players fared because they were in it the whole time. But yeah, I hope Canberra, continue this way because it's really good to see them being successful, especially considering, everything from last season and the off season as well.
Yeah, Anthony Jagarinich said post game that the heat was definitely tough to deal with, and that the squad prepared as best as they could. But yeah, I can't imagine it was easy, and there were a couple of incidents, players going down, which he just said post game was simply heat as well. Why this game was played at 1:30 on a Sunday in 30-odd degree heat, we'll never know. For Perth, they continued to grow under Stephen Peters. He said that it felt like a home game on his return to New South Wales, as there were a few Rams fans in the stands at Jubilee, and that was quite noticeable when Miku Sanaga took the field in the 57th minute. There was a loud round of applause coming out of the grandstand at Cogra Oval. He did also provide an update on Kelly Brown. She copped a knock in the Newcastle game. She shouldn't have played last week against Brisbane, but she wanted to play. And then with the international break coming up, they decided to keep her out of the game to rest and hope that she'll be able to return after the international break. Did you have any more thoughts on this one, Burke?
I think this was a much better performance from Perth compared to the last couple of weeks. So I guess they've managed to, make the necessary changes that have allowed them to actually start playing, I guess, more fluently. And you could really see that, especially in the first half, yeah.
Yep. So we'll move on to the final game of the weekend. Sydney FC 1, Melbourne City 1. Sydney looked very much improved in this game and scored quite early through Mackenzie Hawkesby, but it was a real team goal in the lead-up, even though she was the one who finished it. Melbourne City equalised through Lourdes Bosch, who gets her third of the season, I want to say off the top of my head. Not that she did a whole lot to earn this particular goal.
Yeah.
With Bree Edwards just having... I don't quite know how to put it, because I was saying this to a couple of people that, like, I very much like Bree Edwards as a goalkeeper. I've seen a lot of her in goals. We saw last year she came back into the Wellington setup that, she had a save of the season contender. She's very good at getting herself into the right positions when she needs to, but she just has these few moments in every single game where she's making the wrong decision or she's slightly out of position, and more often than not, it's resulted in a goal. And for me, looking at this one, I don't know if she thought she was a little bit closer to the goal than she actually was. But she was almost on the edge of a 6-yard box and attempted to punch it over the bar, and it's gone over the line into the back of the net. For the only 2 goals of this game. Hannah Lowry, again, went down injured. There's been no update on her as of yet. Another one of those Matildas call-ups going down. City struggled in the first half, got much better in the second half as the heat began to take effect on Sydney FC. Burke, and they weren't quite able to keep up the high press, which stopped City in the first half.
Yeah, that was kind of the whole game. If they had played this game at a later time and it was much cooler, I reckon we would have seen a completely different performance because Sydney would have been able to hold their line higher for a lot longer. Because I think you could see when they stepped out in the second half that they were just they were quite sapped of any real energy because they'd kind of exerted it all in the first half, and because City were allowed to kind of sit back, they could absorb it without having to expend too much energy. That didn't make it any easier to watch. Them getting constantly harassed by Sydney every time there was a goal kick. But yeah, they got through it. The goal was an interesting one for City, as you say. The Hawkesby one was great. It was a really good hit. As much as it pains me to say that as a Melburnian. But yeah, the City. I don't know what it is about Brie Edwards. Part of her like most recent performances are kind of reminding me of Mackenzie Arnold a few years back, where she'd have like good games, but then there'd just be one thing that'd make you go, okay, why did you do that? Why were you doing that? And I get the same kind of thing with Brie Edwards. I don't know if it's a confidence thing or something else, but yeah, because she does give every other sign of being a very good keeper. It's just like you said, the one kind of point where it's just, why did we do that? Why did we make those choices? Don't know. Simply don't know. But yeah, Lourdes Bosch had another great game. Alexia Apostolakis had another excellent appearance for City. I think she's doing really, really well. And I think she's been really crucial for getting on top of any kind of quick breaks that any opposition tries to make on City. Because Rebecca Stott isn't the fastest player on the pitch anymore. And I don't see Taylor Otto personally as being that fast despite her very long legs. Don't know what's going on there. But yeah, Alexia's been very, very key there. And if only this Matilda squad was accepting replacement call-ups, she would be there. She would be there.
Yeah, no, I do agree, and I think Apostolakis will be getting a call up to the senior side sooner rather than later. Just before we move on from this one, Ante Juric once again said post-game that, there's a bit about the criticism that's been levied his way about slow starts and how Sydney FC, if you look historically, have always started slow to a season, at least while he's been there. For me, I think they're sitting in ninth. They've only got 4 points to their name, 1 win, 1 draw. At what point can we stop calling this a slow start and start to express serious concern, or are we already there, in your opinion?
This is definitely the slowest start they've had in what I can remember of watching the A-League and the A-League Women's, and back when it was the Dub. This is definitely the longest they've taken to start firing. I think a lot of it, and I'm borrowing this like assessment from Sam Lewis via Marissa Lordanic, who said that part of Sydney's problem seems to be that they have all of these midfielders that all kind of do the same job. So they're all kind of struggling to make the pieces fit and kind of connect. But yeah, if this goes on any longer, they're going to be in a real tough spot to get out of. Yeah, I'm hoping, but I'm not, I'm not that like excited for them to get things back on track. But I hope they do, just because Sydney are a good competitive side when they want to be, which they did show today, 2 days ago. Jeez. Unite Round really took it out of me. Can you tell?
Yeah, and no. I can totally tell because it's done the exact same thing to me, and I didn't have to get on a plane to come to Unite Round or to leave Unite Round. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I think you're right. I think for me, I think they've got Western United up next, following the international break, they're in the second part of the split round of the international break. I think I think maybe give it for me. It's going to be a couple more weeks, and then if they've still only got one win, then I think the questions need to start being asked, and I think we can stop putting it down to a slow start. And okay, something might be wrong at Sydney, but I'm definitely prepared to give it a couple more weeks. We'll move on to Para Matildas now. World Cup victory 6-2 over the USA. A hat trick to goalkeeper and co-captain Caitlin Smith. One from a penalty, two from long range. Smaller field in CP football. It's a five-a-side game for the women, seven-a-side for the men. First one, or the first of the long-range shots, sort of just bounced just in front of the American keeper and basically nutmegged her. As the second one went over everyone's head, but underneath the crossbar. 2 goals to Georgia Bakeoff and 1 to Anne-Marie de Uriarte to give the 6-2 scoreline, of which the Para Matildas had to come from 2-0 down to win. And there was also a missed penalty by Caitlin Smith as well, so she could have even had 4. They went through the tournament undefeated, and avenged their defeat in the 2022 final, which was also to the USA. Australia finally has world champions in a football tournament, Burke.
And how good is that? I think if you try and explain this to people that don't know football and don't know CP football, telling them that the goalkeeper scored a hat trick is really good. It's just really good information to share. And yeah, I'm really, really happy for the Paratillies. And it's a huge effort actually to do what they did in that game and come back down from a 2-0 deficit. So to make that comeback and then just absolutely blow the US out of the water. Great stuff. Great stuff.
Yes, great stuff indeed. And hopefully the Para Matildas will be able to go on in 2026, which, based on the fact that we've only had one edition so far and it was 2022, I'm assuming she's going to keep on the 2-year tournament cycle and defend their crown. We'll head now to the Matildas squad. We've already touched on it. A number of withdrawals and injury concerns. So last week, Katrina Gorry, Claire Wheeler withdrawn from the squad through injuries, leaving us with the 34-player squad. Then Unite Round came around. Izzy Gomez went down. Hannah Lowry went down. Tash Pryor went down. I've already said Tash Pryor has joined the camp. Still waiting on confirmation of what's happening with Izzy Gomez. And no update on Hannah Lowry as well, although the Mariners medical team liaising with Football Australia per an FA press release. And then on Sunday night, you and I were sitting at the Ladies' League along with multiple other people after Unite Round. And like I know, for me at least, I looked down at my phone and I saw the press release come through. And as I came downstairs to get a drink, I immediately spotted you, Marissa Ladanik, Angela Christian Wilkes, and a couple of other people sitting there. And I'm just like, did you all just read this email? Did you all just read the same email I did?
Yeah, no, when you ducked down to our table and you said, "Have you guys seen that email?" I was like, "Which one?" Running down to my little Gmail app, and then yeah, Mary Fowler pulled out.
Yeah, so Mary Fowler has withdrawn from the squad because of mental and physical fatigue, which, good for her. It's important that, the players look after themselves, that, we finally got women's football to a point where players no longer need to feel obligated to to keep their place in the squad, to, with a call up, to do these sorts of things. Mary Fowler is the future of the Matildas, in the midfield and the attacking areas of the park. And I can't imagine it's been easy for him. We've sort of heard, similar from Courtney Vine, who's taking a mental health break from football as well, where it's been a long period of non-stop football for most of these players. Thinking back to COVID, which sort of pushed the tournament cycle off by a year, and so instead of having a 2020 Olympics and a 2021 off uh, summer, winter, whatever you want to call it, the middle of the year break, you've had 2021 Olympics into 2022 Asian Cup into 2023 World Cup into 2024 Olympics, along with club football, galore, which, for some of these players who are still playing in Australia at the start of this cycle, has just gotten bigger year on year on year, but not big enough that they don't have to play NPL football in the off season. So some of these players have quite literally been on year-round calendars since COVID, or the resumption of football post-COVID, and eventually that's going to take its toll.
Yeah, hearing you list all of those tournaments has it's been a very long few years for the Matildas players, especially when you add the fact that they've been playing at home a lot more, as as they should, but because they all play in Europe now, it's a lot more travel on their bodies as well that they wouldn't previously be used to dealing with. Yeah, just hearing that, I feel tired. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they're continuing to do it either. Thank God. Thank God next year's a year off, honestly. At least a year off from major tournaments. Let me just be clear. Because I know someone out there will be like, they're still playing football though. It's not the same. Don't at me.
No, but didn't you know, Burke, that there is still a major tournament going on in 2025, the Women's Euros? Gosh, we can't just keep looking at things through this Australian-centric lens, even though we're an Australian women's football podcast.
God forbid. God forbid I the Melburnian, look at things from an Australian point of view. I'm so sorry. It never ends.
For those who don't know, Burke got quite a bit of flack on social media for forgetting that the rest of the world exists, despite the fact that she is very clearly an Australian and makes it very clear that she is an Australian in all her social media profiles. So yeah, hopefully 2 games against Brazil. I can't say hopefully 2 games against Brazil coming up. 2 games against Brazil coming up. The first at 9 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, 8 p.m. Queensland time, which is where this game is taking place, and then it's 7:35 Australian Eastern Daylight Time, 6:35 p.m. Queensland time on the Gold Coast. I want to say Sunday off the top of my head. I should know this, shouldn't I?
So the first game, the 9 p.m. game, is on Thursday, and then the second game is the 7:35 on the Sunday, the 1st. My God, it's the 1st of December this Sunday.
Yes.
Oh.
I'm 2.5 weeks away from turning 31. Oh, dear God.
Congratulations.
And then 2 games against Taiwan, the 4th of December, 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, and 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Those games taking place on Wednesday and Saturday, respectively. We will talk more about those next week, as we'll have had the 2 games against Brazil. So we will have Matilda's chat next week, which will take up the majority of the episode to break down, which I'm sure you're very much looking forward to, Burke.
Absolutely am. I'm a bit sad that I'm not actually attending these games, but I didn't personally want to risk being or seeing a single schoolies person on the Gold Coast. So
that is a mood, honestly. I don't blame you in the slightest. We've just got some quick questions to wrap off the show. Sananjay Yatipu on Blue Sky said, hard to tell from watching on telly, but there seemed less people at the games this year, or were they all just sitting on the same side as the TV cameras? But I can't speak for the A-League men's, nor can Burke, as we were at Cogra all weekend, but they were definitely sitting on the TV side where the cameras were, as we touched on a bit earlier. The grandstand was very much created its own wind tunnel and a relaxing place to sit and enjoy the games. Friend of the pod, Simon Royce, has asked us the thoughts on the future of Unite Round and whether moving it somewhere small like Adelaide might be worth trying. He said it seems that playing it in Sydney kind of gets lost in the myriad of other things there are to do. Burke, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I like Adelaide as a place to go for football. I've done that before. It was fun. And it's a nice sort of compact little city. Um, I can't remember where I read it, but I did read someone saying like they could try hosting Unite Round like in like a different city every other year. So like do it in Sydney one year, Adelaide the next year, back to Sydney, and then like Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, like that kind of thing, which could also work. But I wouldn't mind Adelaide at all. I don't know if because I'm not familiar with the geography of Adelaide that much. I don't know if they have enough like grounds for us to do both the men's and the women's. Oh no, they should. They do. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, so I think the way it would be broken down is it would be the men's played at Hindmarsh Stadium and the women probably at Service FM Stadium. Which from what I've seen on television seems to be a reasonable venue, but very much presents the same problem that somewhere like Leichhardt does and somewhere like Cogra does, where the cameras are in the grandstand, and so you don't get to look at a crowd on the hill, which is very much a disappointing sight, I feel, because
mm,
it presents this idea of why would you want to go there if it looks like there's no one there on TV?
yeah. Yeah, that's a very fair call. I think if they maybe tried not doing it so early in the season when it's like very, very hot, and if they instead did it like quite a bit later in the season, because then not only do you get potentially cooler weather, you also get most likely higher stakes games without it being finals football because everyone's trying to get there.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, and I think that there's definitely ways to approach Unite Round as a concept to improve it. I don't necessarily dislike the idea of splitting it and taking advantage of the international break. So if we were to play it in November, for example, right? Well, we've just had a weekend where it was a men's international break, and so you would play the women's Unite Round then to maximise its exposure, and we're just about to come into a women's international break. So you would play the men's Unite Round there again to maximise its exposure. I guess the only problem, and friend of the pod, Marisol Adanik, pointed this out as well, is the idea of we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis, and so asking fans to travel twice in a season
It's a bit
to somewhere
much.
like Sydney, yeah. So, so I think, look, I think the idea of splitting it is worth exploring. Because, like, I know the whole idea is to unite the A leagues. Well, I mean, the idea was to get out of the grand final deal, but the concept is to unite the A leagues, and so splitting it sort of defeats that purpose. But I mean, it hasn't. It's a concept that hasn't taken off in the men's. I think that it's a concept that works well in the women's. But I'll leave that
Mm.
decision to the powers that be. And we also had a question last week on Avani Prakash and what he has to do to possibly break into this Western United side. And we will play that audio for you now. You've got Avani Prakash, who's sort of been in and out of the lineup. What does she have to do to sort of become a more consistent part of the lineup and get regular minutes?
Yeah, it's just like any player that's trying to break into the starting 11, and that's the headache we have. But like I said, there's every opportunity for these players at the club that they're fully supported to get the best out of themselves. Particularly for Avani, she's only 17. She's achieved so much already, especially her call up to the under-20s and the impact that she made. We have those conversations and we try and help the human in the situation, not just focus on the athlete being the footballer. So she's got such a long journey ahead of her and she's going to have to ride these. And coming out and performing like that is just, again, part of who she is and the character she is as a footballer. And, she just keeps developing and she pushes someone out of the starting lineup. That's what happened.
Well, we will be back next week on Wednesday, same as we always are, to talk about the two Matildas games against Brazil, as well as Melbourne City versus the Western Sydney Wanderers and Central Coast Mariners versus Canberra United, because for some reason we have a split round for the international break. I don't know why, but the powers that be have decided that we need dub football this week, apparently. So we shall be chatting about all of that next week. Burke, thank you so much for joining us, just the two of us tonight.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, as always.
We wouldn't have this show without you, Burke. It just wouldn't work without you here. And my name is Poletti. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.